Next Level Racing has been in the sim peripheral mounting game for a very long time. Since 2009, they have produced a wide variety of high-quality sim gear mounting solutions for both sim racing and flight sims. They produce a large portfolio of items including everything from the most affordable wheel stands to the strongest full cockpits. Interestingly though, they are relatively new to the profile rig scene. They released their first aluminum extrusion rig only a few years ago, while companies like SimLab pioneered the use in sim racing over 10 years ago. But don't let their late entry fool you. After building and using this FGT Elite 160, it's very obvious to me that rather than rushing onto the market with another average product, they took their time and made sure that when it dropped, it was going to be one of the best rigs money could buy. And without the shadow of a doubt, they were extremely successful here. The FGT Elite 160 is the most compelling sim rig I've ever tested and probably one of the best ever designed, period. Now, before we get any further with this review, let's handle a few clerical items. First up is my customary disclaimer that Next Level Racing sent this out to me for free. However, as always, they've had no input on what I say in this review. Everything you hear is all my own views and opinions. Also, they didn't pay me any money, and they will not see this review before you do. Second, Next Level Racing also sent me an ES1 fixed back seat, but I'm only going to concentrate on the rig itself for this review. The ES1 is only one of many seats that can be bundled with the FGT. I will do a standalone review on this seat at a later date. And the last thing to mention is I am reviewing the wheel plate edition of this rig. It can also be configured in a front and side mount option as well, so make sure if you end up ordering one of these, you order the correct version for your specific wheelbase. So first up, we're going to hit some common questions and key points. What exactly is aluminum extrusion, 80/20, and profile? Aluminum extrusion is a modular building material that is both very strong and relatively lightweight for its size. Because it is extremely strong, it's commonly found in industrial settings. They are typically measured in millimeters and are sold in long lengths and then cut down to size. The two most common sizes used in sim rigs are 40 by 80 millimeters and 40 by 120 millimeters. Aluminum extrusion is made by forcing heated billet aluminum through a die, which creates channels for mounting multiple pieces of extrusion together. This process is called profiling, and that is where the name profile comes from. Both 80/20 and profile are simply generic terms that are used interchangeably to describe aluminum extrusion sim rigs. SimLab first applied this technology in sim racing applications back in 2015, with many other manufacturers following soon after. But as mentioned in the intro, Next Level Racing didn't release one until much later. What is the FGT Elite 160? The FGT Elite 160 is the top-of-the-line rig offered from Next Level Racing. Depending on the wheel mounting configuration you purchase, it'll cost between $1,000 and $1,200 US, and that is without a seat. It's part of their Profile Series lineup that consists of 4 variations. Now hang on tight here because the naming scheme is a bit of a tongue twister. But starting at the bottom, you have the GT Elite Light and the FGT Elite Light. These are their entry-level options and utilize a smaller 80 series profile, but both will still be considerably stronger than most traditional tubular-style rigs. The GT Elite has a more conventional GT-style seating position, where the FGT Elite Light is a hybrid and can be configured in a GT or a Formula seating position. In the middle, you'll find the FGT Elite, which steps up to a 120 series profile for additional strength. Then at the top you have this, the FGT Elite 160, and as the name suggests, it uses an extremely strong 160 series profile. Both the FGT Elite and the FGT Elite 160 are also hybrids and can be used in a Formula or a GT seating position. The GT Elite Light is the only one out of the group that can't be used in a Formula position. What are the dimensions of the FGT Elite 160? Well, that will depend on how you have it set up. In its Formula layout, it will have a larger footprint than it will in its GT layout. With that being said, my current GT seating configuration has the following dimensions. Including the seat, it is approximately 72 inches long by 26 inches wide. The wheel deck uprights are 37 inches tall, and the seat back is about 46 inches tall. It's not small, so you will need a significant amount of room to fit it in your sim space. Now let's move over to some detailed pros and cons, and we'll start with the pros. The first pro, and probably the most obvious one, is the Elite 160's incredible strength and rigidness. I won't spend too much time here because it is obvious, but just know this offers similar performance to any other top-tier profile cockpit. You would want to cross-shop this Elite 160 if you were also considering rigs like the SimLab P1X Pro or similar. Rigs in this category are the ultimate endgame for stability and rigidness. Now just a heads up, if you happen to notice any movement in these clips, it's only because my rig is sitting on the carpet, which has some give. There's absolutely no movement in the actual rig whatsoever. The next pro is the design itself. It's very clear that Next Level Racing spent a lot of time in research and development before bringing this item to market. This is the kind of thing that's hard to explain in words, but it's something you notice right away during the build process. The order in which things go together and how all the individual components work together to achieve a common goal is very evident throughout the entire assembly process. These are not just random pieces of profile bolted together in a generic way like so many others I've assembled in the past. There is deep purpose behind every element of this cockpit. Next up is the angled wheel deck uprights. There are a few rigs that utilize this design rather than the normal 90-degree angles you typically see. The first rig that I tested that had this feature was the SimLab TR1. That was about 5 years ago and it's now been discontinued. According to manufacturers, this adds additional stability and strength to the rig. Now, I'm not 100% convinced it makes much difference in that department, but it does make getting in and out of the rig significantly easier. That's the pro here for me. Since the bottom of the uprights are further away than the top, there's a lot more room to maneuver your legs in and out, and that is a very nice feature. The next pro is the built-in seat slider. Some of their seats do come with a traditional slider, but the rig itself also has a built-in slider system that I like a lot better. Traditional rail sliders are quick and convenient, but they also typically have some movement even when it's locked in. Whereas the system built into this Elite 160 rig is completely solid. There is no movement whatsoever when it's locked in place. The way it works is there are 4 ratcheting latches on each corner of the 2 profile seat mounts. When they are loose, the mount can slide along felt tape which is installed between the profiles. This allows for smooth movement and quiet operation. Once you get your seat in place and tighten the 4 corners back down, your seat becomes a completely solid connection to the rig. There is a bit more time and effort involved in doing it this way, but it's totally worth it to have a perfectly static seat. The next pro that separates it from others is it doesn't use generic corner brackets as connection points. Most of the profile rigs I've tested use universal style corner brackets. While they do work, they aren't the best solution in my opinion. For one, it's very easy to over-tighten these, which cause tiny stress fractures and in some cases break completely through. Either way, this results in a less strong rig overall. Second, they introduce a third point of attachment between 2 pieces of profile. This makes it more difficult to get things lined up properly. On the Elite 160, all of the individual components are mounted together in one of 2 ways. Either a strong custom mounting plate is used like what's found at the bottom of the wheel deck uprights, or the individual pieces of profile are pre-drilled so that they can be bolted directly to each other. For example, if we take a look at the base of the rig, the sides connect to the rear section by long bolts going through pre-drilled holes in the side profiles and into threaded holes in the ends of the back section. This lines everything up perfectly and creates the strongest connection and bond possible. The next pro here is, like its 2 smaller siblings, the Elite 160 is modular and can be configured in 2 different seating positions, a stretched out formula position and a more upright GT style position. This requires no additional items to be purchased up front and can be set in either configuration right out of the box. You can also switch back and forth at will, just be aware that this is not a quick change and it will take some effort to get it swapped over. Additionally, within each seating position there are various adjustments that can be made to further dial in and fine-tune to your preference. As far as I'm aware, there are no other profile rigs on the market that offer this feature and this level of adjustment right out of the box. Now next up in the Pro is part of what makes the previous Pro possible. It's the adjustable pedal mounting system. This is one of the most robust pedal mounts I've ever used, but also at the same time it has a huge range of adjustability. Typically a pedal tray is either very sturdy or it's very adjustable, but usually not both to the level that I see here. There is usually some type of compromise between the 2 features, but there are no compromises to be found here with the Elite 160's pedal tray. It has a wide range of adjustment in height, distance, and angle while still being extremely strong. The second great part of the system here is it basically has infinite pedal pedal compatibility right out of the box without any holes needing to be drilled. Instead of being a full flat tray like seen on many other rigs, this one is split into two horizontal rails that can be spaced out apart at any distance to line up with the mounting holes of any set of pedals. However, because of this design, if you run individually mounted pedals like Husingvelds or similar, you will also need to keep in mind that you will need a dedicated heel plate, otherwise there will be no floor area for you to rest your feet on. Continuing on with the pros list is the shift arm and shift mount design. This rig utilizes what I like to call a two-piece shift arm. It has the standard arm that extends back from the wheel deck uprights, but it also has a second rear stability arm that mounts back to the base of the rig. And this isn't just for the shifter arm. It also creates another closed contact loop for the wheel deck uprights, which adds additional stability throughout the entire rig. As for the mount itself, it works well and offers plenty of pre-drilled holes for all of the common shifters available on the market. It's also plenty wide enough to mount a shifter and a handbrake side by side. There is also some slight angle adjustment, but it's limited compared to other features on this rig. One thing to be aware of though is because the uprights are angled, you may find your hand gets very close to them while using certain shifters with a long gate between gears. So just use caution when dialing in your overall setup to make sure you leave enough room for your hand. And then finally getting to the last pro here, it's actually a few items that all help to make the assembly process go as smooth as possible. First up is the instruction book. This is the best set of directions I've used to build anything in a very long time. The directions are well laid out and it is very easy to follow along as you go. These days I usually ignore instruction booklets and try to find a tutorial on YouTube to follow, but if you happen to watch my build video, I'll put the link in the description, you probably would have noticed that after a few minutes into the build process, I actually turned the computer off because as rare as it is these days, the book was actually better than the video. The only tricky part for me was the shifter assembly, and that's probably more my own fault than the actual instructions themselves. It's laid out in the instructions as a left side mount, but being I am from America, I needed it to be mounted on my right side. And the directions simply say mirror directions for right side mounting, and as silly as it sounds, my brain was having a hard time comprehending the mirror thing. It wasn't so much how the pieces of profile went together, it was more trying to figure out which channels within the profile needed the specific T-nuts and how many actually went in each channel. I asked a few other people that I know are also testing the rig, and they also confirmed that that part threw them for a loop as well. So in hindsight, it probably would be nice to have an additional page that shows the directions going on the other side of the rig, but all in all, the directions were fantastic. Additionally, they include all the tools needed for initial assembly and future adjustments. It even includes a small ratchet and a bracket that holds all the tools right on the side of the rig. There's also a bag of cable management brackets that help to keep things clean and organized if you like to have a tidy rig. I am only half good at this, so I did the best I can, but most people would probably want even better cable management. Luckily, you have all the tools to do that. And finally, and this is a big one, at all the key adjustment points throughout the entire rig, there are printed measurement marks, which are super helpful in getting everything lined up perfectly throughout the entire build process. And these will also be helpful in the future if you decide to make any changes in the layout. Just a quick FYI though, building any profile rig is not an easy task. And for this one specifically, make sure you follow the directions exactly like the manual calls for. There are certain steps here that cannot be done later than what is shown in the instructions. If you get out of order, you will find yourself having to go back to disassemble parts just to get back to the missed step. So just take your time and follow the directions precisely. And now it's time to move over to the cons, but just to be upfront here, it was really a stretch for me to find and come up with legitimate cons for this rig. It is really about as perfect as you can possibly get, and I think most people would consider this a dream rig. But if I really nitpick, I can come up with a few compromises that some might consider cons, so here they are. Con number one is going to be the price. There's no getting around the fact that this thing is very expensive. I believe it's worth it, and it's very similar to comparable rigs, but there has to be some discussion about whether or not it's going to be the best value depending on your specific use case. And I'll talk more about that in the final thoughts, but for now, let's continue on with the cons. Next up is fully assembled. This rig is extremely heavy and hard to move around. You really need two people to get this safely moved into your rig's final spot, and once it is, you'll want to leave it there. This is not the kind of thing that you can move in and out freely in your space. And finally, the last con is the assembly and setup process in general. Now, this is not specific to the Elite 160. It's more a general con that exists with any aluminum profile rig. Assembling aluminum extrusion is an extremely tedious process. It's slow and at times confusing. I've assembled many profile rigs at this point, and this one still took me about 5 hours to fully assemble. And then it took me another good day or so of adjustments to get it fully dialed in perfectly for my preferred seating position. Trust me, it's worth it in the end, but it can be a bit overwhelming if it's your first time. And now we'll move into my final thoughts. There's absolutely no doubt that this is one of the best rigs currently available. Next Level didn't cut any corners here, and it very clearly shows both in the design and the build quality. The Elite 160 has a lot of standout features, but the ability to run it in a full Formula or GT seating position is what truly separates it from other manufacturers. It's a feature-rich, top-of-the-line sim rig with no compromises. So does that mean you should run out and buy one? Well, probably not. Arguably, this is one of the most premium rigs that you can buy, but it comes at a very premium price tag. Now, I'm not saying this is not worth the price, because it probably is, but what I am saying is this. For the majority of sim racers, the FGT Elite 160 is probably going to be overkill. Most people will probably get a very similar experience with the standard FGT Elite, or possibly even the FGT Elite Lite. Now, of course, this will highly depend on your specific setup and needs and where you plan to go in the future. But generally, I think the best value here is the middle of the line standard FGT Elite. You still get all of the great adjustability, both seating positions, and plenty of strength and rigidity for most users, just at a less premium price. There are, however, a few caveats to this though. If you think you will ever run motion or use an extremely strong wheelbase, let's say something 20 Newton meters or above, then you may want to consider going ahead and picking up the 160, since it will offer the most rigidity possible for high-end components like that. For anyone else though, my recommendation is the standard FGT Elite. Hopefully this review has been helpful. If it was, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. Also, if you would like to help support us, please consider becoming a channel member or use our Amazon affiliate link in the description below. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I will talk to you in the next video.